Hello and welcome to Six Part. Today I'm going to start a new series, What If Deku Had the Ultra Ego Part 1. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and to watch more videos like this, subscribe to my channel and turn that bell notification on so you never miss an upload. Now wasting no more time, let's begin.
After being chastised by his fellow pro-heroes for his stunt involving the slime villain, Izuku Midoriya dragged his feet across the pavement on his way home from Tatooine Station. He could still clearly recall their mocking remarks, which denigrated him for attempting to protect his classmate from the villain. To be honest, though, he didn't really give a damn about what other heroes thought or said about what he did. Because his hero idol, the number one hero All Might, had previously told him that he had no chance of ever being a hero if he didn't have a quirk. He had heard those words many times growing up, from many different people, and they hurt just as much each time. But realizing the true worthlessness of his dream and hearing those same words from the man he looked up to broke his heart. You see, Izuku was labeled as quirkless at an early age, belonging to a small group of people who were born devoid of extraordinary talents. His father could shoot fire out of his mouth, and his mother could make small objects float to her. However, fate chose to deny him his heroic aspirations and instead render him ordinary, which implied that there was very little chance of becoming a hero. A quirkless person could never be the kind of hero that All Might was. As he walked home, Izuku thought to himself, maybe Kacchan's right, maybe I was just in the way. Since he was born without any powers, he was constantly envious of others who had them. See, everyone in the world was born with extraordinary powers that could either transform their bodies into solid steel or make them extremely strong. It was a world full of remarkable and astounding things. Even some of his classmates were gifted with extraordinary abilities. For example, Katsuki Bakugo, also known as Kacchan by Izuku, was able to produce explosions with his hands. Even though Bakugo was the one being held captive by the villain, the heroes nonetheless applauded Bakugo for his bravery while demeaning him for his careless actions. He was one of the few who wasn't born with a quirk, even though so many other people possessed incredible powers that would make them legendary heroes. Why? When someone like Kacchan would use his quirk to harm him, why was he the only one who wasn't born with one? This served as yet another reminder of how pointless his desire to be a hero was. How he should have just stayed to the side like everyone else, but instead he did everything wrong to save his friend. How he should have given up on the absurd idea that he could be anything like All Might, and how he shouldn't have even bothered to try and help someone when he had no powers at all. And for a brief period of time, he truly considered giving up. Initially, all he wanted was to go home and put everything behind him, but he made the decision to go home via a different route for whatever reason. He made the decision that he needed to get away from everything and spend some alone time, making sure no one saw him. He thought the boy would come down this alley, not realizing that his idol, All Might, was out there looking for him, but strangely was unable to locate the boy as he eluded him. Declining in stature, All Might said, "That's strange, I could have sworn he went this way." As he surveyed his surroundings, looking around for the boy with green hair, he asked, "Where did he go?" hoping to talk to him about something that would change his life forever. Things would still happen, and the boy would still be given an opportunity. But destiny had other plans, one that would benefit him and alter his course indefinitely. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. Izuku eventually succeeded in straying and making his way to Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, which was well known for the copious amounts of trash that were deposited or washed up on its shores. Izuku felt drawn to this place for some reason, though he wasn't sure how or why he ended up there. As if it were his proper place. He couldn't help but believe, though, that the world was simply trying to tell him something as he peered through the broken pile and trash. Telling him that, as it turned out, his dream was a waste of time, garbage, and unwanted attention. Setting down his backpack, he gazed at the heaps of trash looming above him as he entered the crowded beach. When he looked at the mountain in front of him and contrasted it with his own life, all hope left his eyes. How he would never be a hero, no matter how hard he tried or what he did. He would never be the same as All Might. He would always be known as Deku the Useless. You should just give up, there's no way can become a hero. A quirkless loser like yourself can never become a hero. A shit nerd like yourself could never be as awesome as I am. You should just give up now. I'm sorry, but you can't be a hero without a quirk. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, Izuku. You can't become a hero." He screamed into the void, something inside of him snapping, 1,000 emotions resonating in his voice as he collapsed to his knees. He continued to scream in anguish and sorrow at the world's cruelty for rendering him quirkless while holding his head. His voice was sore and hoarse from screaming his rage at the world after years of unrelenting bullying, mockery, and anguish. He cried for an indeterminate amount of time, tears streaming down his face, and he didn't seem to care what happened to him as he kept screaming. With teary eyes, he slowly raised his gaze to observe a large fridge in front of him. His anger and grief overtaking him, he swung his fist at the fridge, the large metal machine towering over him. He cried out in agony, his fist clenched and red from the impact of the metal refrigerator on his skin, which had bled. He swung his other fist at the fridge again, but this time he didn't care because his other hand experienced the same outcome. However, he continued to act indifferently, merely slamming his fists against the refrigerator. He kept punching the fridge, screaming, "Why? Why? It's not fair. It's not fair. Why was I born without a quirk? Why am I so useless?" He simply allowed his grief to take control, with the metal hardly moving. "Why can't I have an amazing quirk like everyone else?" He struck the same spot again, and this time the metal bent slightly. With each punch he delivered, his fists hurt, his hand bones trembled, and blood seeped from tiny cuts that split open across his knuckles. "Why can't I be like everyone else?" The fridge began to bend in further as his fist continued to strike the metal. His entire arm hurt, and the blows were causing his body to tremble. But he punched again, ignoring them as he went. "Why can't I be like them? Why can't I save people without a quirk?" A skeleton-like man with blonde hair watched from a distance as his fist kept hitting the dent, which grew larger and deeper. Then he screamed and pulled his fist back. "Why can't I be a hero?" The boy's world would be forever altered by what transpired next. Izuku's entire arm started to light up red right before he delivered his last blow. His body throbbed with pain, which pooled inside his muscles and compressed into his fist. And when he struck with his fist once more, the entire refrigerator bucked inward and burst out the back, leaving a sizable hole in it. The boy was startled out of his melancholy daze by the loud, ominous creaking sound of the twisted metal, and he turned to stare at it. The beach fell silent as Izuku just stared at the metal, then down at his hand, the red light slowly fading away from the skin around his hand. He held his hand in agony as the pain returned to him before he could ask himself what had happened. "Gah!" he exclaimed, balling his fist. The pain appeared to be severe at first, but it gradually subsided into a mild numbness. He tried to make sense of what had happened to him and eventually calmed down when the pain subsided. What the hell was that? How did I?" he exclaimed, pausing to look back at the refrigerator and briefly experience hope. Izuku could only stare as the fridge fell backwards, asking, Was that my quirk? It would appear so. Izuku gave a small start and spun around, startled to see the big, burly man in front of him. All Might!" he exclaimed, looking up at the hero and forgetting all about the numbness in his hand. The man merely laughed as he said, Why are you here? I thought you'd still be back with those reporters." Izuku screamed in terror as his idol transformed back into his skinny form and spat out a lot of blood. "Ha ha ha. Getting away from them was a piece of cake. Why? Because I am All Might blurred. All Might then stood in front of the boy, wiping the blood off his chin, instantly killing the mood. Izuku waved his arms and instantly shook his head, saying, "As I was saying, yeah, it looks like you've got a quirk after all, kid. Which is odd because you told me you didn't have a quirk. What, did you lie to me about it?" He looked down at his hand and said, "And no, I would never lie to you, All Might. Honest, I don't understand it either. The doctor told me I shouldn't even have a quirk because the only thing different I had was 2 extra joints in my pinky toe." All Might raised an eyebrow in disbelief. 2 extra joints? All Might put a hand on his chin and he thought about it. And he said because of it, my body would never be able to have a quirk. He said that I could never be a hero like everyone else, that I should give up. But what does this mean? Why has my quirk suddenly manifested now? He asked. I'm not sure. To this day no one fully understands how quirks are developed or how they came into being. It's possible that you're just a late bloomer. Or you developed your quirk due to certain circumstance. I can't really say for sure, he said while staring at the youngster. He said, But aside from that, there's a reason why I tracked you down, to Izuku's bewildered expression. Izuku blinked and looked puzzled. I wanted to thank you, and correct something about what I said earlier. If you hadn't been there and hadn't told me your life story, I would have just been a worthless bystander in the crowd and that kid would have died because of Ida, so thank you, he said while shaking his head. Noah, you got it wrong, I caused all this. I got in your way and it was my fault the villain got away in the first Placia. All Might interrupted, I'm not done, as Izuku turned to face him. Before, when you told me you didn't have a quirk, I belittled you and told you that you couldn't be a hero. And I realize now that's something that a true hero should never say, not when he stands by and does nothing. Yet today, out of all the heroes there, you were the only one who could move. You, a shy person without a quirk, rushed in to save a life when those with a quirk could only stand back and watch, myself included. And that really touched me to act, Izuku said with wide eyes while listening to the guy. You know, there are stories about people who became great heroes because they all had one thing in common. They all said, my body just moved on its own. And I'm guessing that's what happened to you, right? Izuku was limited to staring as the memory of his own body moving replayed itself. Then came the image of his mother sobbing as she expressed her regret for him being born without quirks. He nodded, his hands coming up to his chest, his hands gripping his heart. He replied, why yes, while crying as the man cast a downward glance at him. I thought so. That's why I want to correct what I said before and tell you. He couldn't believe what the man was saying to him, and his heart was thumping hard in his chest. Not to him, not to someone who resembles him, not after all these years of being turned down and mocked. It was overwhelming to process what he was saying to him, of all people. The next thing he said was what he had always needed to hear and always wanted to hear. You can become a hero. Izuku wept with joy after hearing the words he had been waiting so long to hear as he fell to the sand, a few grains getting stuck in his hair. The exact words, rather than, sorry, he wished his own mother had said. The words he had been waiting for so long, words that would inspire him to press on and show everyone wrong. That he was capable of being a hero. And now the man he looked up to, his idol, had just given him the inspiration he needed to realize his dreams. A champion. And he could finally become a hero like him with the unexpected appearance of his own quirk, whatever it was or why it appeared. There was nothing that could cheer him up. You are the one who's worthy to inherit my quirk. The beach was suddenly silent as Izuku stopped crying and turned to face the man. Huh? He asked, and the man grinned back. Wait, what do you mean inherit? All Might ran his hands through his hair and exclaimed, that expression is a gas, it's just a suggestion. For now, so, listen up, because your true test is about to begin. With blood spurting from his mouth, he yelled, it's just a matter of whether you'll try your damn hardest to absorb my power. Blurg. Your power? What are you talking about, All Might? He questioned, wiping his mouth clean of blood. I'm talking about my quirk, kid, pay attention. Now most of these days, journalists are always trying to guess my quirk and make the conclusion that it's something like super strength or invulnerability. And whenever I'm on a talk show and the host asks about my quirk, I just use a well-timed zinger and dodge the question. He laughed as he raised his finger. He spread his arms and said, because the truth is it wouldn't do well for the symbol of peace. If it was discovered he wasn't naturally born with this gift. Izuku was shocked and he responded, the power I have is not unlike the sacred torch of legend, being passed down from one bearer to the next. All Might nodded and he said, what? It's a quirk you can inherit. That's right, and now I've chosen you to bear its flamesa. Wait, hold on. Just wait. Hold on a second, what do you mean by inheriting? It's certainly been the debate that your quirk is one of the world's great mysteries. Some days I've barely seen sunlight researching the matter on the net. But a quirk that's inherited? No, I'm afraid that I can't wrap my head around it. I've never heard of such a thing in the most fanatical conjecture. And why? Because recorded history has left no trace, not the slightest inkling it could be possible. Everyone has their own individuality, inborn traits which make up the fundamental factors by which they may establish themselves, and is precisely the reason they exhibit the special. All Might just stared at the boy as he appeared to be muttering to himself about geeky things and seemed to be evoking the word mutter as he spoke. He asked, The boy lost in his ramblings. You always start off with denial, huh kid? As soon as the boy was able to shake off his daze, he yelled, nonsense. Izuku looked at the man, his expression determined and his voice serious. Look, kid, there is a lot I keep close to my chest, but I do not lie. The power I was given was the power to transfer power. I was bestowed with it by my master before me, and now I pass it on to you. This ability called One for All. One for all? That's right. One man cultivates the power, then passes it on to another. The other then fosters that power, cultivates it and passes it on to another. It is the crystallization of power that spins together the voices of those who need help with a courageous heart, he said while staring at Izuku. All Might shook his head and gestured to the boy's chest. But why are you giving it to me? Is it because I just awakened my own quirk that you're giving me this? The boy asked. Tears formed in Izuku's eyes as he could not believe what he was hearing. No, it's because for a while now I've been searching for a successor, someone who will inherit my power. And today I found him. You, Izuku Midoriya, who without a quirk and no powers at all, risked his life to save his fellow classmate, shines so much brighter than anyone else there, brighter than even the heroes themselves, brighter than even me. Izuku nodded almost instantly, a bright, determined look shining in his eyes. Though, to be honest, you having a quirk already might be helpful to inherit my power. Whatever you quirk may be. But, like I said, it's your decision to make. Do you want to inherit my power? Do you want to become a hero? Yes, I do, All Might exclaimed as he fixed him with a look of amusement. I like to hear a straight answer, but first things first, we need to figure out what that quirk of yours is, he said, gesturing to Izuku's now bleeding arm. Izuku felt the same pain he had felt before All Might appeared the moment he brought it up. All Might shook his head and said, oh, right, I guess we should go see my doctor then, huh? No way. If that quack of a doctor can misdiagnose a latent quirk for a two-joint pinky toe, then I don't want him to treat you anymore. That's why we are going to head to the one person I know, who knows more about quirks than anyone else. Izuku raised his eyebrows. Who? Afterwards a Uehaya infirmary. Izuku's eyes widened as he surveyed Uehaya's infirmary, one of the top heroes' academies that instructs students on how to use and apply their quirks appropriately. In addition, All Might, the hero of Izuku, had attended the academy. Naturally, Izuku desired to train in the same facility as his hero. But as he and All Might walked past the teachers, the poor nerd found it nearly unbearable to be here at this moment, inside its halls. Oh, my gosh, I can't believe I'm in UA High. This place is even more amazing on the inside. I can't believe they let me in, especially since they don't usually let non-students in. Not even the journalists have been able to get thanks to the UA barrier that stops anyone from getting in without a special ID for students, teachers or even visitors. It's always been my dream to be here, but now that I'm actually here it's all too much, I don't think I can handle it. Izuku winced and All Might yelled, stop geeking out. Don't get ahead of yourself, young Midoriya. You still have a long way to go before you can get into UA, but for now, we're just here to see a specialist about you Quirk, and relax, she already knows my secret. Right, recovery girl? He glanced over to a petite elderly woman seated atop a stool. A short, elderly woman with gray hair pulled back into a bun with a syringe looped through it stood in front of the two. She also had on a doctor's lab coat and a dress with two yellow buttons, a pink belt, and vest-like designs on either side in red and yellow. She has a helmet on her head and is dressed in pink boots. She also carries a cane that resembles a syringe and that she can use for healing. The man shook his head and she responded, yes, I was rather surprised to get your call, All Might. I could have sworn you wouldn't start teaching here for another 10 months? Izuku blushed at the compliment. Yeah, but then I found this kid and decided to make him my successor, as recovery girl turned to face the boy in front of her. Glancing at the boy's scrawny body, she said, him? You've decided to give one for all to this kid? Yeah, well, he impressed me today and I think he's just the one to inherit my quirk. However, he claims to have been born quirkless, yet just a few hours ago his quirk suddenly manifested. I was hoping you'd be able to help analyze and tell us what it is, he said with an eyebrow raised. Just manifested? That's impossible. Most quirks usually develop when they're 4 years old. You're telling me this boy just developed his now? She asked with a nod. I saw it with my own eyes, and from the looks of it, Midoriya here was just as surprised as I was. So, I was wondering if you could help? I'd rather not go back to his original doctor, he said with a sigh and a nod. She said, okay, let me run some tests, but let me heal your arm first, as the boy extended his arm to her. And with that, her lips pursed and settled on the boy's arm. Izuku was initially alarmed until he realized his hand cuts and blisters were starting to heal. His skin returned to normal soon after. Chiyo Shuzenji, also known as Recovery Girl, is her name. Quirk. Recovery. By reaching out and kissing someone, Chiyo can use her quirk to accelerate and enhance their healing process. This allows for the complete healing of some severe injuries in a matter of seconds rather than months. But for the healing process to be effective, the recipient must have endurance. After the procedure is finished, leaving said receiver extremely tired. That's incredible, Izuku exclaimed, examining his arm. It had fully recovered. Don't try to move around just yet. My quirk may have healed you, but it draws the healing ability from your stamina. You'll feel a bit dizzy when you get up from the chair, so take it slow, she said with a nod. He nodded and gave her the contact name, so she took a sample of his blood and left the room. Now then, let's have a look at this quirk of yours. See what All Might is talking about. I'll also need to contact the doctor who diagnosed you in the first place to get your files, she said. After 30 minutes, Recovery reappeared holding a clipboard. She said, I've got the results back and yes, it does appear you have a quirk. I also contacted the doctor who treated you and he confirmed you were diagnosed quirkless when you were 4. But the man seemed to have done a lazy job and neglected to run a more thorough analysis on your body when you were young, pulling back the seat in front of the boy who was paying close attention to what she was saying. As it turned out, you did get a quirk when you were 4, it was just lying dormant inside your body until it was time for it to develop at a safer stage. Probably when you got older. But something must have triggered it prematurely, most likely something emotionally or physically stressful, and awakened your quirk earlier than it was meant to. From the initial testing, and from what you and All might have told me about punching a fridge, which was reckless if you ask me. Izuku giggled nervously. Izuku stared in shock as she said, I've been able to deduce that your quirk is a endurance type, where your body absorbs physical damage and releases it throughout your body. The woman shook her head and he asked, so, it's like that hero, Fat Gum, who absorbs a person's attacks and releases it in one singular attack? Sort of, more like your body charges itself with physical attacks, or even self-damage and circulates the energy around and amplifies it in your body. Then it's released in a certain section of your body, amplifying your strength momentarily. I also noticed that the state your muscle is now compared to after I healed your arm are stronger now. Not by much. But it appears that every time your body endures pain, it temporarily amplifies your strength and then strengthens your own body afterwards to endure more next time. Izuku's eyes grew wide at this. In a sense, it allows you to endure more pain, she said. Izuku winced as she exclaimed, but don't think for a second this makes you invincible. While this endurance power of yours strengthens your body, the side effect of it is the physical damage you take because your body doesn't have an enhanced healing ability. Your body is just ignoring the pain till after the temporary boost of strength wears off. Then afterwards you feel the pain from the experience, and after you heal naturally or is boosted by my quirk, it adjusts itself to handle a high level of pain. Izuku looked down at his hand as he flexed his arm muscles, and she said, I'd caution you not to do anything reckless. We don't know how much punishment you can take before your body gives out on you. Because we still have no idea the full limits of your quirk, because there has never been such a case of a person developing a quirk so late in their lives. But this power is mine, right? I have my own quirk? All Might and Recovery Girl gave the boy a quick blink before nodding. He closed his fist and grinned, a few drops of tears welling up in his eyes. Yes, for all intents and purposes that is indeed your quirk, young man, she said. Thank you for telling me, Thesa. You don't know how happy this makes me. With this, I can help people. I can endure anything thrown at me and become the hero I dreamed of being. I won't be useless anymore. Thank you. The two adults questioned what had happened to the boy to cause him to act in this way. To be praising them as though they were gods who had given him such a wonderful gift. What childhood experiences did this kid have? In any case, All Might touched the boy's shoulder. Izuku nodded as he got up, was given the results by Recovery Girl, and left the infirmary, being escorted by the UA. This quirk you have now might be able to help handle the power of One for All. I want you to meet me back at the beach 2 days from now. I need to do some research before we can start your training. But for now, just go home and get some rest. You have had a big day and no doubt more to come, it said. Safety. All Might and Recovery Girl were left alone in the hospital as a result. The girl in recovery leaned forward and put her hands on her cane. Are you sure you want to give One for All to him? That quirk of yours is a dangerous one if not mastered correctly. It could destroy him, she said while nodding. I'm sure. I believe he is worthy of carrying on the will of One for Allah. I could see it in his eyes. He could be a great hero one day, maybe even greater than I. And what about his own quirk? He barely knows how to use it. Your predecessor had a quirk, but she had it long before she received One for All, while this one has only just discovered his. We have no idea what will happen if you give him One for All now, while he still learns the basics of his own. For all we know, One for All and his quirk could crush him. All Might widened his eyes as he examined the entrance. He nodded and she asked, are you really willing to take that risk? I think so. That spark, you saw it in his eyes, didn't you? Chio arched an eyebrow at the man's smile. I like that he has the willpower to persevere and give it his all, he remarked as she turned to return to the paperwork, sighing and praying that he wouldn't meet the same end as a boy she knew in the past. The Midoriya residence in Izuku. As Izuku made his way home, the street lights washed over him. It had grown dark since his mother was probably very concerned about him. Since his father abandoned him at the age of 4 to take a job overseas, she was the only person he had left. It didn't matter right now whether or not he was certain that was the truth. He was genuinely ecstatic. He possessed a unique quirk that will enable him to realize his dream. And he was happy, for once in his life. I'm home, he exclaimed as he opened the door and kicked off his shoes, hearing footsteps sprint toward him. His worried mother, Inko Midoriya, coddled her only child, saying, Izuku. Izuku. Where have you been? I've been worried sick. I saw what happened on the news with that slime monster. Are you hurt? Did you get injured? Why were you out so late? But then she saw that when the boy smiled at her, it was a real smile. She questioned, Izuku? Are you okay? Why are you smiling? As the boy gave her a piece of paper. After reading the piece of paper, her eyes grew wide and she turned to face him. Izuku kept smiling even though tears were starting to form around his eyes. He said, I have a quirk, Mum. I can be a hero, just before she began to cry and gave him a strong hug. Swirling 1,000 emotions in her chest, she gave the boy a firm hug. The one that was most radiant, though, was joy, since she was overjoyed that her son could now realize his dream. She felt guilty for years that she couldn't give her son her quirk because he aspired to be a hero above all others. And now, through an odd miracle, her son's dream could come true. All she could do was wish she had backed him sooner. Izuku slept better than he had ever slept that night. He had always dreamed of becoming a hero, and now, because of his quirk and All Might's belief in him, he can fulfill that dream. He thought that his dream might come true. But in 2 days, he would discover that becoming a hero is a difficult, drawn-out, and dangerous journey. But he would persevere through it all and emerge even more resilient. Because this was the tale of how Izuku Midoriya rose to become the world's greatest hero. As the sun rose in the morning above Dagoba Beach, Izuku Midoriya was attempting to pull a big refrigerator that had rope wrapped around it. Izuku had only known about his latent quirk, Endurance, for 2 days, and had been attempting to unlock it ever since. He didn't make much progress thus far because he still didn't know what his quirk could do, and Recovery Girl only taught him that he appeared to absorb physical assaults and self-harm, which he would subsequently transform into energy that would flow through his body, fortify it, increase his strength, and release it in a forceful blow that was capable of bending metal. But then he would experience the residual pain that had triggered the whole thing. His body would then use that pain to fortify his bones and muscles, making them stronger than they had ever been. It was similar to how muscles in the human body would rip, repair, and strengthen themselves following intense exercise. This peculiarity appeared to quicken the procedure instead of taking days, probably to compensate for the boy's extreme weakness compared to most children of his age. He was cautioned, though, since one never knew what else his quirk might be capable of or how much abuse his body could withstand before becoming accustomed to it. They might only be beginning to explore the limits of the quirk's potential. For all they knew, it might still be in its infancy. After all, this was the first instance of a person acquiring a quirk at a later age. One could never predict what might occur. But for now, he was too busy trying to move the big fridge off the beach, so his quirk would have to wait. He tried to move the fridge off the beach, but he grunted and found it difficult to pull the rope. Which did not make it any easier with All Might perched atop the stupid object. As he sat on top of the refrigerator, All Might exclaimed in his hero form, "Hey, hey, this fridge actually makes a comfy seat." Izuku tripped and fell face first into the sand, exclaiming, "I'm sure glad you haven't been able to move this thing off the beach. I'm getting awfully comfortable up here." The man grinned and peered off to the side. "Come on, All Might, don't you weigh like 274 kilos or something? So, it's not exactly easy to move it with you on top?" he asked. Izuku nodded and turned to face him. "Nope, plus I've lost weight recently, so I'm only 255. In this form at least," he said. The man smiled and held up his phone as he asked, "Anyway, why did we come here again? And why am I hauling garbage?" While glancing around at the large amounts of garbage, he began snapping pictures with his phone and exclaimed, "Ha, aren't you precarious? It's because you're not a proper vessel yet." Tears filled Izuku's eyes and he snapped around. Holding his body low, a cloud of depression covered his form as he screamed into the sand, "What? But that was the opposite of what you said yesterday, Yua." Izuku stopped and turned to face the number one hero, saying, "Calm down, kid, I'm talking about your body." A mental projection of Izuku's body with its limbs and head exploding before them said, "You see, One for All is unlike any other quirk that is known to mankind. It is the sum convergence from the strength of countless men. A body that's too weak and unprepared for that kind of power." Izuku blanched at this. "Your limbs would fly off and you'd explode," he exclaimed. He clutched his arms together and cried out in terror, "My limbs will what?" But then blinked in realization. The man nodded and held up his thumb. "Oh, I see. So this is a training exercise, right? To build up my body to handle your quirk?" the man asked. "Correct. But that's not all. See, this exercise is to also help you learn and master your own quirk, seeing as it only just manifested. Now seeing as you absorb physical damage that strengthen your body, I can only assume that it would be the same if you exercise your body on daily basis, pushing it beyond your limits and strengthening it faster than most humans," he said as he approached the refrigerator. "So, if we train your body harder, your quirk will enhance your strength as well as your body, thereby increasing your base level of strength, making you a more suitable vessel for One for All, faster. But the other reason was that this was the place your quirk finally manifested. I figured what's a more fitting place to train than here." He smiled as he looked around the beach. He said, "But also, I feel sad that this place was left to rot, such a poor state it has become," slightly denting the refrigerator with his bare hand as he tapped it. Izuku looked around, noticing the fridge he had managed to bend out of shape when his quirk finally showed up. "Oh yeah, now that I think about it, the tide brings in all this stuff from the ocean and pile it up here. People took advantage of this and began illegally dumping stuff," he said. He put his hand on top of the refrigerator and said, "The young heroes these days are more focused on the flashy aspects of being a hero, fighting bad guys and getting all sorts of fame because of it." The fridge bent and broke as he pushed it to the ground, saying, "People have forgotten that heroes used to do stuff like this as community service. Before the harrowing gig got so popular. They can call it plain all they like." With a single push, he flattened the refrigerator and the big pile behind him, declaring, "But I refuse to allow the basic fundamentals of what it meant to be a hero be forgotten." Izuku could only watch in amazement as he yelled, "And that's how I'll teach you, young man. From the ground up. So, let's revitalize the horizon of this place." Izuku, feeling the full weight of the task, looked at him and then at the mountains of garbage. "You, young Midoriya, and your quirk will clean up this beach, and mark it as your first step to becoming a hero," he exclaimed. Glancing around, he said, "This whole place? While learning to master my quirk?" With a smile on his face, he said, "Isn't this a bit much?" The boy nodded and he said, "Midoriya, my boy, you're aiming to get into UA, right?" "Yes, it was your alma mater after all, and I reasoned that there couldn't be a better place to learn how to be a hero than the place you went." He looked at the man and said, "Ah, if that's okay," before the man burst out laughing. Izuku recoiled and attempted to hide inside his arms as he exclaimed, "So, you're fixated on that, without thinking any deeper. What an otaku." "I thought I made this clear. This isn't an occupation where a person without a quirk can take it lightly. It may be different now that you have a quirk, but it will still be difficult nonetheless, especially because you've only just discovered your quirk and the extreme difficulty of UA's requirements," he said while staring at the child's gaze. "The people who are entering this exam have trained harder than you and had more time to understand their quirks, so you'll be at a serious disadvantage. There are only 10 months left until the UA entrance exam, so we need to master your own quirk and make you into a suitable vessel in time by that date," he said as he turned around and reached for the stack of paper. "I've put this together as a result. The foolproof method to master your quirk and prepare yourself for the exam is to follow the aim to pass American Dream Plan." As Izuku finished reading it all, he said, "You really did consider everything, right down to my sleeping schedule." As he turned to face All Might, who put his hand on his shoulder, he spoke. "This training is going to be extremely difficult. Are you sure you want to pursue this course of action?" Izuku glanced at the paper in his hand, considering how difficult this would be, and he asked. "Yes, I already know that if I want to succeed in anything, I'll always need to work 10 times harder than everyone else. And now for my personal quirk. I'll have 10 times more endurance, and fulfill my desire to become a hero." As All Might fixed his gaze on the boy and then grinned, he spoke. "All right, let's get going," and so began the 10-month training hell. Izuku would spend days on end picking up trash at the beach after school and on weekends, carrying it to the beach's entrance, followed by a 10 kilometers run around the park and a series of exercises until he was unable to move his own body anymore. Eventually, his body began to strengthen and adjust, thanks to his endurance, which allowed his body to adjust subconsciously after resting. In addition, he started to alter his diet at All Might's request. The next morning, he would still hurt, but not as much as he would have if he hadn't had endurance. When he would always come home exhausted from school, Inko would worry, but he would just smile and tell her that this was the only way he could learn to master his quirk. Trying to help him, she followed his request to change his diet and kept encouraging and motivating him. That was enough to keep him going. When he got to school, he chose not to tell anyone that he had a quirk because he knew they wouldn't believe him and would just make fun of him. If Bakugo found out, he would just bully him even more. Thus, he put up with their jokes and remarks because he knew he should ignore them and that what really mattered was that he now had a quirk and that he was going to be a hero. Since Recovery Girl had been the one to confirm that he had a quirk, All Might had decided that it would be best if she served as his personal physician and helped the boy learn the boundaries of his quirk. This meant that every week after training, he would visit UA for a routine checkup. Nothing major happened, but it was always safer to document anything that happened in case it did, so she kept a log of everything he did, including changes in his diet, physical changes, and any new developments that might have occurred with his quirk. Even so, he was amazed that he was entering the University of Alabama's halls before most people, which only encouraged him to push himself harder to get in. However, Recovery Girl would chastise him for pushing himself too hard and forcing her to constantly heal his injuries, to which he would apologize and vow to try harder not to hurt himself. Not that he could help it. But as time passed, Izuku came to realize that if he wanted to get stronger, he had more options. All Might would therefore remain behind after the beach, honing his use of his quirk, gaining control over the power that had lain dormant inside him for so long, and learning the boundaries of what his quirk could and could not do. Attempting to replicate the previous time's effect, he punched another fridge, almost breaking his fist on impact, but he was unfazed and kept hitting the metal box. Initially, he thought it was a fluke, but then he felt the familiar energy flow through his body once more and pile into his fist. Just like the previous time, he bent the entire fridge inwards and blew the back out. It verified that the damage he sustained was absorbed by his quirk, which then circulated and intensified the energy within his body before releasing it through a single point, most often, his fist. His body gradually growing stronger as he could now lift heavier objects, punch harder, and take more punishment than most kids his age. His endurance pushing him to work harder than ever before, he continued to train harder than before, work harder than anyone had ever worked before, and push himself to his limits after realizing this. Even though there were days when he felt his body screaming in agony, to the point where he would throw up from the stress, he overcame it, pushed himself back up, and carried on. After all, His entire life had been filled with people making fun of him and treating him like a second-class citizen because he had never displayed a quirk. He had been pushed down into the dirt where they felt he belonged, and their mockery of his heroic dreams stemmed from the fact that he hadn't displayed a quirk when everyone else had. His ambitions were ridiculed, his drive was ridiculed, his desires crushed, and his life turned into a living hell by the person he had once called a friend. To be honest, he probably would have approved of it. However, things had changed now. He didn't want to disappoint him, he couldn't disappoint him, and he never will. He had an expectation to live up to. He had someone who believed in him to fulfill his dream. Someone who said, "Yes, you can be a hero," and spent his time helping him to accomplish it. After 7 months while All Might was riding his Segway and Izuku was running through the park, well, Izuku was running in a blue tracksuit. All Might was telling the boy some encouraging words as the boy was breathing heavily and panting, and then All Might tripped and fell to the park floor, stopping as he looked over at the boy. Hey, what's wrong? Just 3 months remain until the test. Your quirk has helped you make some significant progress, but at this pace, you won't succeed. Do you wish to give up? Take a day off and indulge in cosmetics. Even as blood spurted from his mouth, the man spoke. When he walked over and pulled the sleeve back, he saw that the bandages were wrapped around his hands and extended down to his forearms, stopping just short of his chest, and that weighted training gear was resting on his legs and forearms. He narrowed his eyes as the boy gripped the dirt, his body trembling as it appeared as though he was on his last legs. These are training weights. How long has he had these on? And these wounds? Had he been running with these kinds of things on his body the whole day? He asked, his body shaking. Have you not been adhering to the plan? As the boy lay there on the ground, he asked, getting no response. Kid, it was meant to force you to reflect, modify your physical prowess, and recognize your quirk before the exam. However, if you continue to overdo it in this manner, bad things will happen. Are you interested in passing or not? Izuku only gripped the leaves on the ground as he started to stand back up. A faint glow of red radiating off his skin as he stood up, his whole body shaking like the leaves that fell from the trees. The man reprimanded the boy for his irresponsible behavior. Yes, I do want to follow it, still, it's insufficient, not enough to simply finish the test. I'd like to do it well. My goal is to excel. And I can handle it because of my quirk. Because I'll just trip and fall if I don't put in 10 times as much effort as everyone else. He uttered those words as he rose slowly to his knees and then to his feet. A momentary red glow flickering around his body before he looked up and glared into his eyes. Like you, I want to be a hero. I want to have the strength of the most powerful hero, All Might. I want to be just like you. So give me everything you've got. I'm able to handle it, I'll persevere, he yelled, gazing at the dumbfounded man. With his body trembling like a leaf in the wind and his legs still trembling, All Might could only stare in amazement at the boy in front of him, knowing that at any moment he would fall face first into the dirt. But for the moment, All Might felt a deep sense of pride in the boy as he realized what the boy was doing. The boy finally fell forward as All Might sped over and caught him by the scruff of his tracksuit in his hero form. I get it now, he wasn't looking at the first goal in front of him. He was looking at the ultimate goal far down the line. That's how far he's willing to go. Izuku thought, taking deep breaths. This kid is willing to put his body through hell. Push the very limits of a quirk he's only recently discovered and try to excel at one of the most difficult entrance exams in the hero world, even if he just passes. It seems like you're a mischievous lil one. But you know what, he said, holding up the boy, a broad smile spreading across his face. I can't say I don't like it. He put the boy on his shoulder and laughed hysterically. Having said that, it's not a good idea to rush your training, however, I can see your point of view. So don't be afraid. This old man is going to change the plan a little. All Might, though, are you not elderly? Izuku spoke haltingly as the man smiled. Faltering, but let's get you to Recovery Girl right now. If we want to update your training regimen, we need to get those injuries healed. Huh? Buddha, but she'll just be upset with me once more? That's what you get for overexerting yourself, I suppose. As the leaves gradually dropped from the trees and covered the two, a genuine relationship between a teacher and pupil was established, one that would endure for eternity or for however long All Might had left. 1 month prior to the exam, 2 months later. After 2 months of Izuku demonstrating his desire to do well on the UA exam, All Might, moved by his dedication and determination, rearranged the plan to push him to the absolute edge of his abilities, and thus far, he had shown signs of improvement, pulled up to the beach in his car as he got ready to meet Midoriya for another training day. He was able to give the boy more guidance on possible uses for his quirk because All Might was present to oversee his quirk training. He could now lift a moderately sized fridge over his head with some ease, though he still struggled with the weight. It was an improvement nonetheless. They had already discovered that after taking at least 7 strong hits, his quirk would begin to charge energy into his body, then amplified and unleashed through a single point. What they wanted to know was what would happen if he didn't unleash the energy after gathering it. Keeping the training weights on was a good idea, but they increased the weights whenever his body would endure and adjust to the weight, which usually lasted a few weeks. They were curious as to what would happen if he collected the energy but chose not to release it. Izuku's endurance quirk was an odd one indeed, but with time he would eventually become stronger, and with One for All, his strength will know no limits. After a brief test, they found that if the energy wasn't released, it quickly died out, losing the boost of strength that could bend a whole fridge in half. But his body still seemed to be gaining the endurance experience from the pain, so that was something. They still had a month until the exam, so maybe he could finish the beach by then, assuming he masters with the power first. All Might was startled by this behavior and walked to the beach's entrance to see what had caused him to act in this way, and when he did, his eyes widened in shock and awe. Suddenly, he heard a loud scream as he quickly ran to the beach and became confused as on top of a large pile of garbage stood a shirtless Izuku Midoriya as he screamed up to the heavens, his voice ringing out among the early morning sunrise. He muttered, "Hey, hey, hey," as he peered out at the beach. 9 months ago, this beach was covered in mountains of trash that stretched from one end to the other. The sands were piled high with an assortment of junk, including cars, refrigerators, microwaves, barbed wire, sinks, and pretty much anything else that could be thrown away. However, All Might did not see it that way. What he saw instead was a spotless beach with a serene blue ocean gently washing across the sands, all of which were made aesthetically pleasing by the sun rising just above the horizon. The place was unquestionably 100 times better than it had been in the past. Amazing. He even went beyond what I had instructed. Really? Not a single grain of dust remains. Really? The man could only watch in dismay as the tide gently swept in. It seems like all of his time after dark was spent picking up trash. He turned to face the boy and saw that he was once more wearing bandages around his arms, with tiny bloodstains dripping from them from using his quirk to expedite the process. He must have pushed his quirk to the limit, giving him the strength to haul the large parts away, he thought to himself. He finished 1 month ahead of schedule for the exam. With a wave of pride rising in his chest, he turned to face the beach and spoke. "Oh my God, what a goodness!" Izuku staggered to his feet and tumbled off the big pile of trash, but All Might sprang forward and caught him in midair, tenderly holding the weary boy in his arms. He cried as he changed into his hero form. He said, "You earned yourself a rest, kid, you did good," to which Izuku gave him a feeble smile. He said, "All Might. I did it," as the man gently set the boy down on the sand. "You're telling me that you finished the entire thing in less than a month, kid? Not only have you exceeded my expectations, but you have completely exceeded them. Look at this," he said as Izuku focused his vision on the photo and stared at it. The photo was of himself, 9 months ago, the same day All Might told him his body wasn't a proper vessel. Why was he showing him this? He wondered. The boy smiled and he praised the boy until he held up his phone to the boy. "Look at you now," he said, surveying the boy's physique. Gone was the skinny boy he had first met, but now he was packed with muscles, not excessively large like bodybuilders, but impressive nonetheless. "That was you, 9 months ago, when you first discovered your quirk and began to train under me," he smiled, looking at the boy. "You performed incredibly well." Then, pointing to the sizable heap behind him, he spoke. "You are a genuine vessel right now, even though we have only just begun to explore the possibilities that lie ahead of you." As Izuku glanced at the picture on the phone and then down at his bandaged hand, he said, "I feel like I've cheated somehow," he said, clutching his fist as a few tears surfaced at the corners of his eyes. "You spent so much time on me, helped me learn how to use my quirk when I had only recently discovered it. I can't help but feel blessed." All Might arched an eyebrow at the boy. Tears were streaming down his face as he spoke. To his surprise, though, the man simply shook his head and said, "Young Midoriya, that's not true. I just showed you the way. It's time for the award ceremony, so stop crying now." Izuku nodded and wiped away her tears. "All of this, you accomplished on your own. This was your own strength," he said. He then pulled out a strand of hair. "And because you managed to get us a whole month extra, we have some extra time to help you handle my quirk better," he said. He uttered these exact words as he momentarily flashed back to a time long ago when he stood before his master. "This is something I was once told. Something you receive because you're lucky and something that you're given because you are recognized as different in essence." Izuku nodded, balling his fists. "Take that to heart. This is the power you earned because of your own effort." The greatest moment of his life, second only to being told he could be a hero by the same man, was when his idol gave him a boost of confidence and joy for his dedication. He had worked himself into the ground, had gone through so much suffering that any other person would have given up by now, but he had persevered, had reached the first step, and was prepared for anything life had to throw at him. "Eat this." He wasn't prepared for that. "All right." The man appeared to be laughing as he spoke. Izuku could only stare in shock as he said, "It doesn't really matter how it's done, just as long as you take in some of my DNA." "Yes, but I didn't anticipate it to proceed in this manner. It's not at all what I had in mind. Furthermore, I don't think you should say that to a teenager in public." The man just shook his head, but he still said, "Eat the damn hair. It doesn't matter. Please, please, please." Izuku swallowed the hair strand and overcame his hesitation. He said. He was disgusted, but when is eating a hair strand supposed to be pleasant? When you find a hair strand in your food, you know how it feels to want to throw up. Izuku tried to force himself to swallow the hair strand on purpose, but he was able to control his gag reflex and quickly swallowed the hair and exhaled quickly. "All right, I downed it, though difficult. I succeeded. Are you certain that doing this will grant me your authority?" The man nodded and he asked. "If that's what you're asking for, you won't get it right away. What do you think a stomach does, anyway? The hair will be broken down by your stomach over the course of 2 or 3 hours. You ought to feel my power coursing through your body by then," he remarked, pulling out his phone and hitting the send button. He said, "Izuku looks confused, but I've also just sent a text to Recovery Girl. She'll need to be here for the next part of your training." "Why? Why is Recovery Girl required in this place?" The man turned to face him, and he asked. "We're going to examine the effects that One for All will have on your body, so to speak. My initial intention was to transform you into a suitable vessel just in time for the exam, but it would have been hurried and your body would not have been acclimated to the strength you now possess. If you used it for the entrance exam, there would be dire consequences. For starters, instead of your limbs flying off, the bones in your body would most likely break after one punch, or your legs could shatter if you tried to run at my speeds," Izuku thought to himself. "My body would shatter. You anticipated that would occur, and you were planning to send me in that manner for the exam?" The man laughed nervously and he yelled in shock. "Yes, but I was confident that you would manage to get through it. At most, I think we might be able to get you to handle 1% of its full power with assistance from your endurance quirk," he said, placing a hand on Izuku's chin. "But now that you've managed to squeeze in an extra month, we can now focus on controlling the power of One for All," he said, realizing that his idol had originally intended to throw him to the wolves with no idea how he would pass. "All mighta, that was recklessa." "Yeah, I suppose it was," the man said, laughing before reverting to his normal form and coughing up blood. "However, you exceeded all of my expectations with just one child. I'm sure you'll pass," he said, putting a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. Izuku stared at the man for a moment before nodding and grinning broadly. "You've made it this far, and with the extra time you managed to give us, you may just excel at the exam yet," he said. "We might as well kill the time with some extra training. I want you to run 50 laps around the beach until she gets here," he said, looking through Izuku's backpack and tossing him a fresh set of weights. "Now until Recovery Girl gets here." Izuku grinned, stood up straight, and nodded as he spoke. "Yeah, sir. Please do not address me as sir." After 3 hours, when Recovery Girl's car pulled up, she saw the massive pile of trash that had accumulated in the parking lot right away. She raised an eyebrow, got out, and walked to the edge of the beach, where, like All Might, She was astounded by the lush waves and immaculate sands that now covered the beach instead of the trash that had previously occupied it. She said, "Dear me, I never thought I'd see this beach so clean," as she descended the stairs slowly. "Get moving, young one. Even at 1%, I can run faster than that." Sweat streaming down his body, she saw Toshinori aka All Might yell at a shirtless boy who was running up and down the beach with weighted gear on his arms, legs, and chest. "Hey." The man with the skeleton-like appearance sighed and put his hands on his hips as he said, "It's okay, I'll keep running." He turned to see Recovery Girl standing on the sands, saying, "He really is just like you, Toshinori. I remember when you used to do this sort of thing with your master long ago," she remarked, and the man nodded before turning to look at the boy. "Did he clean this whole beach by himself?" the girl asked. "I'm hoping you're not giving him any harmful ideas." He shook his head and she asked, "The boy is reckless enough as he is." "I promise you I'm not." I was totally taken aback when the intransigent child finished a month ahead of schedule. These days teens are so unpredictable. Honestly though, it's a blessing. When Izuku eventually returned and exhaled heavily from his heavy pants with a light sheen of sweat dripping down his brow, he said, "He's going to need all the time he can get if he wants to harness one for all properly and not break his limbs." "Hi, Midoriya the young one. Come on, it's time," he said in a serious voice as Izuku nodded and saw Recovery Girl. He quickly put on one of his All Might t-shirts and took off the training weights from his body. He soon stood in front of the adults, and there was a palpable feeling of trepidation in the air. "Kid, this is it. Your 9 months of training have finally paid off. Can you feel my power coursing through your entire body now that it has been 3 hours since my hair should have digested?" Izuku looked at his chest and put a hand over it as he asked. "I believe so." As the man nodded, he spoke. He then pointed to the ocean, narrowing his eyes. "I want you to punch towards the ocean with all your strength. The first thing we're going to do is see how much your body can handle before it succumbs to the backlash of One for All. Then we'll see if it will have any effect on your endurance, Quirk." Izuku glanced between him and the ocean, then nodded. "Chaos, all the power you can think of and just let loose," he said. The boy arched an eyebrow, and the man shrugged. "Okay, what you want to do is squeeze your buttock and scream inside your heart, smash," he said, nodding as he crossed to the sea. "It just helps to activate it," he added. Then he stood at the edge of the beach, feeling the cool sensation of the waves gently tapping at the tips of his toes as he closed his eyes, breathing out as he opened his eyes and drew back his fist, feeling a surge of energy radiating inside of him as red veins appeared all over his right arm and the smell of salt water and sand filled his senses. Then he screamed at the top of his lungs and heart, squeezing his buttocks and throwing his fist forward. Wham! All Might and Recovery Girl watched in amazement as they were the first to witness this incredible display of power as an enormous shockwave blasted off his fist and shot across the ocean, traveling nearly 30 kilometers away. The shockwave created 2 large walls of water that speared out into the sky, creating a brief rainbow of color. The walls of water lingered in the air for a moment before crashing down and sending a small tidal back to the beach. But then there was a scream, because his right arm was now completely dark red, the bones in it cracked and snapped, and his forearm had been cleanly snapped in 2, hanging helplessly in its skin with a lot of blood seeping from its knuckles. Great shocks of pain shot through his body, making him gasp and grit his teeth in agony. His skin briefly glowed red, and he felt his quirk instantly activate as it gathered the energy and amplified it within his body, causing his left fist to glow red. With no other option, he brought his left fist back and performed the same action, creating an even bigger shockwave that sent the water shooting higher than before. The waves then came crashing down as Izuku let his left arm drop. Like his right, the bones in his left arm had shattered and dangled helplessly at his side. All Might and Recovery Girl watched in shock at the second shockwave of power that the boy had unleashed. They knew that the boy would have converted the backlash of One for All into energy and would have to release it to see what would happen. But they never had expected it to be anything like this. It was almost unenviable. What kind of power did the boy now possess? Midoriya. The boy gasped and grunted in pain, and Toshinori yelled as he hurried over to him, Recovery Girl trailing behind him as she quickly started to examine the boy's arms. He caught the boy as he fell backwards, using his hero form to support him. Midoriya, my son. How are you doing? I knew you would turn the backlash into energy because of your quirk, but I never expected it to be that powerful, All Might remarked as he held the boy. My boy, how are you feeling? Izuku gasped and grunted in agony as he asked. Oh my. I feel like a bus just struck my arms. Oh no, Recovery Girl held up one of his arms tentatively as she examined the damage, and he managed to grunt out, realizing that the second shockwave had clearly rattled his bones with that one. It appears that the pressure completely broke the bones in both of your arms. Your quirk did its best to lessen the damage, but it was hardly able to withstand the unexpected burst of energy from One for All. Even with the damage, it's not that much, she remarked, setting the arm back down on the sand before using her quirk to heal him. The boy felt a little lightheaded for a moment, but in a matter of seconds, his arms were completely healed, and Recovery Girl took hold of his arm to examine the muscles. Just from looking and feeling the muscles in your arm, I can already tell that your quirk has already attempted to adjust and strengthen the muscles in your arm from the backlash of One for All. However, based on what I've observed, it doesn't appear to be capable of withstanding another full blast. Not just yet, anyhow. One for All just seems like too much to bear in a single sitting. If you want to be able to adjust your body to the feedback, I'm going to venture a guess that you will need to train with One for All several times at a lower level. She glared at the boy and remarked, but this does confirm that your quirk and One for Alls are a dangerous breed together, but also very useful to adjust to it. I told you to be more cautious because your quirk won't make you unbeatable, Recovery Girl scolded as Izuku flinched and hung his head. Seriously. You must exercise greater caution. Especially since the exam is next month, you need more time to get the hang of this quirk. Looking at his arm and watching All Might deflate back to his normal form, she said. To be fair, the idea was to create a suitable container for One for All so that he wouldn't blow up after just one step. To be quite honest, though, I thought we would be done on the day of the exam at the time. However, Izuku blushed. We now have a chance to properly train with One for All. Thank you for your help, Recovery Girl, he said, rubbing her forehead as the elderly woman sighed. Just be careful, I can only heal so much, and death isn't one of them. I won't be here to heal your wounds forever. I have to return to the USA. I now need to get my exam materials ready. Until then, All Might, see you. And Midoriya, she uttered, drawing the boy's attention. Recall that this quirk only enables you to endure greater suffering than most. It does not grant you invincibility. Nobody is completely pain immune, so proceed with caution. He nodded quickly, and she gave him one last reprimand before heading off the beach. The boy then overcome the side effect of Recovery Girl's quirk and got back up, leaving All Might and Izuku on the beach. So, now that you've had a taste of One for All, how would you describe it? Izuku blinked and then attempted to think as he asked. Well, it was more of a BZZT than a whoosh, yes, I am aware. It was similar to watching an egg explode in the microwave. Laughing at the analogy, All Might coughed up blood. That's a pretty dull way of looking at it, but it's undoubtedly distinct. Well, if that's how you understand the power of One for All, then we need to spend the next month teaching you how to manage the amount of watts that pass through you, or just learn how to turn down the timer. All we need to do is get you to imagine the egg not blowing up in the microwave. A microwave. You are one heck of a kid, aren't you? Izuku nodded and looked embarrassed as he said. He then got up and faced the boy, saying, but not only that, we're going to have some sparring sessions to make sure you can fight with One for All. Izuku looked up at the man and he said. What? He said as he looked at the large man now, sparing. As the man nodded, he spoke. After giving us an extra month, I've realized that while I've been working to acclimate your body to One for All, I hadn't thought about teaching you how to combat it. However, since we have this extra time, I will assist you in harnessing the power of One for All to keep yourself from losing consciousness during the test. While it won't be at 100%, I can assure you that you will be able to exert some influence over One for All and achieve UA. With his hands on his hips, he uttered those words. Mizuku Midoriya. Are you prepared to discover how to harness my power? To complete your exam and advance toward your goal of becoming a hero? Since Izuku had already responded, he said. Indeed. The man grinned and he shouted, without hesitation in his voice. Once more, a direct response. You're cool, kid. As the two started their training to master the power of One for All, he said. The road to becoming a hero was still paved with obstacles and trials that would test the boy's strength of character as much as his physical prowess. After all, UA was the most prestigious hero school to enter, and the tests they had are meant to bring out the true character of a person. It would take a month, but by the time the UA entrance exam started, Izuku would be able to handle it with little difficulty. After all, this was just the beginning of our hero's journey to become the greatest hero of all time. Omake. The training of All Might. It had only been 2 weeks since he had cleaned up the beach in time, and now he was going to spend the rest of the month with All Might learning how to harness and control One for All properly. And after feeling the backlash from such a power, Izuku realized that he would need all the time he could get to master One for All. Izuku collapsed to the ground, gasping out heavily. His body spent the entire day working out with All Might, and he could already feel the effects of endurance speeds up his body's adaptation to the strain. But as he sat back up and turned to face his teacher, who was standing and staring out at the twilight, that then prompted a question. All Might? The man turned to face him as he asked. Yes, Midoriya? He asked, catching the boy's attention. How did you become proficient in One for All? Did this differ in any way from your teacher's methods of instruction? The man abruptly flinched and turned his head away from him as he asked. How was my instruction? As the man kept staring at the setting sun, he spoke. Well, with all the hero work going on at the time, my master couldn't finish my training, so I was taught by a friend who knows about One for All, the man said, trembling to the point where his knees buckled. Because my body was stronger at the time, I was able to contain One for All with ease using his training method, which was a little different from mine. Stopped shaking legs. In an attempt to stop him from shaking, he smacked his thighs and said, He's terrified. What kind of man was this teacher of his? Izuku thought, somehow picturing the man who taught All Might as some terrifying person of unbelievable power, while all he could do was stare at his idol, shaking like a leaf in the wind. A little old man wearing a black mask over his eyes, beige spandex, and a yellow cape sneezed in the distance and wiped his finger across his nose. Oh, Toshinori must be thinking of me? The man remarked while savoring a small meal. The UA High School Hero Course is a mandatory training program for individuals who aspire to be recognized as pro heroes in order to obtain the necessary certification. Other courses and academies could be found all over the nation, but because so many great heroes of the modern age had attended and graduated from these halls, AIS was the most prestigious and competitive. Like the hero who refused to accept a National Honor Award, or All Might, the #1 hero. The fiery hero, Endeavor, was ranked as the second best hero in history and resolved the most incidents. Additionally, the #4 hero, a Best Jeanist, is the 8-time winner of the Best Jeanist Award. Upon graduating from UA to become a great hero, one had to complete the academy, and one of Izuku's objectives was to gain admission to this academy and turn into the greatest hero the world has ever seen. Izuku was a little anxious about standing in front of the school, so you could understand. Yes, he had visited us several times, but mainly so Recovery Girl could examine him and determine his quirk. Even then, she would chastise him for being too careless in the training process. However, he was now going to take the entrance exam to gain admission to this academy. This was the next development in his heroic journey. As he attempted to calm himself, Izuku took a soothing breath. He looked down at his bandaged hand and said to himself, You can do this, you've been training for this, and you have your own quirk now. So, this should be a piece of cake, right? He had been given the ability to become One for All for a month, and he and All may have used the remaining time to teach him how to use it and how to fight so he wouldn't pass the test. Learning to reduce the power of the quirk so that it wouldn't harm his body was challenging at first. Sometimes he pushed it too high, and sometimes he made it too low. He had needed Recovery Girl's healing on multiple occasions after breaking his arms and legs, and he was now afraid that she would blow a casket at him for his careless actions. She would then chastise All Might for not making a greater effort to instruct him. Izuku eventually succeeded in harnessing 1% of One for All, which allowed him to direct the power into his limbs without experiencing any blowback. Which was only made possible by his quirk, which absorbed One for All's damage and fortified his body in preparation for its next use. That does not imply that there were not any difficulties, though. He would end up tearing some muscles in his body if he used more than 1% of one for all because his quirk would not be able to endure the pain in time. It was difficult, taxing, and painful, but in the end, Izuku thought he was prepared for the entrance exam, so it was all worthwhile. He was prepared to face and overcome whatever life had in store for him, since that was the extent of his quirk's abilities. Accept the challenges life threw at him and return the favor. He was also able to acquire more bravery from his training by learning how to remain composed in the heat of combat. He learned not to freeze up after sparring with All Might in mock battles, which were meant to toughen him up. Throughout the battle with the boy, All Might was forced to wear unique devices on his body to restrict his strength. The man intentionally scared the boy and caused him to freeze the first time they faced off by unleashing a wave of killer intent. He would then go on to explain to him that it was risky to freeze in the heat of battle and that doing so would almost certainly result in your death when facing a villain. As they battled repeatedly, All Might was able to hammer this point home into Izuku's mind. Even though Izuku had lost every battle he had with the man, over time he gradually began to gather up the courage to take on the man. Rising once more, prepared to battle, despite the knowledge that he might never prevail over him. But the only way he learned to advocate for himself was through failure. Izuku turned to see Katsuki approaching from behind and was startled by the sound of someone saying, "Get out of the way, Deku." Alright, so perhaps he did exhibit some fearful tendencies, but those seemed to be limited to situations in which Bakugo was involved in interacting with strangers. After all these years of bullying, the boy had left him with a deep emotional scar. He would naturally have leapt. A sharp pain shot through his chest, and he automatically raised his arms to defend himself. This was a habit he'd developed from all the times the boy had beaten him up when he was younger. To others, it was just a twitch of nerves, just another aspect of his shy and timid nature. However, it was merely a defense mechanism to keep himself safe. With a glare on his face, the teenager responded, "Kei-ka-chan." Pushing past the boy, he growled, "Out of my way, or I'll kill you." Izuku tried to greet the boy and wish them both the best of luck, but he simply ignored him and headed for the front door. Izuku groaned piteously and looked at him. He was still baffled as to why Bakugo was constantly upset with him. Ever since it was revealed that he was quirkless when they were 4 years old, things had been that way. He used to love their times together as friends even though they teased him. They didn't treat him any differently. However, after that, something changed, and Bakugo became irrationally enraged with him. The boy got scared sometimes because everything he did seemed to rile him up. He still considered him a friend, though. Even if that is how Bakugo perceived it, it dawned on him then that Bakugo had done him no harm since the slime villain. Yes, he did spend the majority of that time preparing for the entrance exam and honing his quirk. However, he continued to show him no disrespect at school. He didn't do anything to him, didn't attack him, and didn't bully him. All he would do was glare and turn to leave him. Coming from someone who had spent the most of his life teaming up against him, it was strange behavior. But for now, he had to get to the entrance exam, so he couldn't worry about that. This is it, he told himself, forcing a brave and determined expression on his face. This is what I need to do to become a hero. As he moved on to the next step, he thought to himself. Then fell on his own 2 feet. My big mouth and me, I'm sure I'll hit the ground. He thought to himself. It should have occurred to him that the universe would pull one final prank on him before letting him into the academy. It just didn't seem like it would be this awkward to him. But then he stopped abruptly, realizing he was floating in midair. He just hovered over the floor, his feet no longer making contact with the earth. He blinked once or twice before becoming somewhat alarmed and wondering what in the world was happening. A pleasant voice asked, "Are you okay?" As he turned to face a girl with shoulder-length brown hair, 2 long locks next to her face, and a short bob at the back. Izuku couldn't help but stare into her big brown eyes, rosy cheeks, and round sort of face. The boy could only stare. "Sorry about using my quirk on you without asking you, but I think it would be bad luck if you tripped, don't you?" she said. She smiled brightly and said, "Man, I'm pretty nervous, aren't you?" Izuku was at a loss for words and could only stammer and stutter. The boy was left staring at the girl as she walked away, saying, "Well, it was nice meeting you. Good luck." His body went rigid and all of a sudden he was grinning. "I spoke with a girl just now," he remained silent. To be honest, talking to a girl suddenly felt like a completely new experience for him. He remained silent toward her once more. He was a little lost for words now, mostly because he never got along with any of the girls in his own school. He didn't get along with anyone. In Bakugo's case, it was the first time someone had expressed a desire to speak with him rather than intimidate or deter him. In addition, she just assisted him. He had never in his life had anyone his age bother to try to help him. Typically, the students at his school would have either disregarded him or acted as if he didn't exist. However, for some reason, that one brief encounter with the kind girl lifted his spirits, and he grinned and hurried to the main hall. Eager and prepared to take the entrance exam. But also secretly hoping to see that cute girl again, to travel to the UA with her perhaps. If they both succeeded in passing. Still, he never did get her name. However, he remained silent once Morea oh boy. UA elevated atrium, the large room went dark and the lights dimmed. Then, the stage lights came on and there was a man on it, dressed in a leather jacket, with an odd device around his neck, orange shades, and absurdly long hair that shot up into the air. His identity as the prominent UA teacher and pro hero, Present Mike, was immediately recognized by Izuku. Elevated. Using his quirk, he yelled, "All right, examinees, listen up. Welcome, all to my live show. Hope you all are having a great day. Now, everybody say hey," and waited for a response. But all he got in return was silence. Despite his obvious disappointment, which was evident from the way his body shook, he said in a happy tone, "What a refined response. As I strike another pose, I'll give you a brief overview of the practical exam," he exclaimed. He cried out, "Are you ready?" "Yeah," but was met with silence once more. Izuku, meanwhile, had transformed into a rabid fan as he studied the hero. Izuku nerded out and whispered, "It's the voice hero, a Present Mike. Wow. I listen to him every week on the radio. I'm so moved. All the teachers at UA are pro heroes. Awesome." "Shut up." Bakugo growled next to him as the boy just gave him a glare. Although the boy was already accustomed to Izuku's fanboy behavior from middle school, it still irritated him. Then Present Mike addressed the assembly once more, clearing his throat. "As it says in the application requirement, you listeners will be conducting 10-minute mock urban battles after this presentation. You can bring whatever you want with you if it benefits your quirk, after which you will then head to one of 7 specified battle centers. Okay? You should have received a card already telling you which area you need to go." Everyone went through their cards. Izuku looked to his right and saw that Bakugo was positioned in Battle Center A, and he realized that he was scheduled to go to Battle Center B. He glanced at Izuku's card and said, "In other words, it's so they won't let you work with your friends, huh?" They saw that although their numbers were consecutive, they were placed in different areas. It was probably generated at random. Izuku instantly flinched out of habit as he hissed, "Don't look, or I'll kill you." Izuku appeared a little taken aback and a little confused by the boy's comment. "Damn, now I can't crush you," as the teenager glared at his card and clicked his tongue. Then, 3 distinct images appeared on the screen and the monitor lit up. Everybody had a number between 1 and 3. There are 3 different types of foe enemies that are stationed at each battle center. You earn points based on each of them and their level of difficulty. Your goal is to use your quirks and immobilize the foe villains as quickly as possible. Of course, attacking other examinees and any other unheroic actions are strictly prohibited, he said with everyone nodding. A tall, muscular adolescent stood up, and everyone turned to see the serious voice say, "Excuse me, may I ask a question?" His hair was black, and he wore half-rimmed glasses with a rectangular shape, matching his jaw and eyes. Present Mike said to the teenager, "Okay, on the printout, there are 4 types of villains, yet there are only 3 on the screen. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prominent school in Japan, should be ashamed of that foolish mistake. We, the examinees, are here in this place because we wish to be molded into exemplary heroes," he said while simply staring at the individual. He pointed to Izuku, who blinked in bewilderment, saying, "In addition, you over there with the curly hair. You've been muttering under your breath this whole time. It's distracting. If you are here on a pleasure trip, then you should leave immediately." Seriously. This man takes himself very seriously. Present Mike waved a finger at the boy and grinned, provoking him to think. Okay. Settle down, examinee number 7111. Thanks for the great message. But I assure you it is no misprint. The fourth villain is worth exactly 0 points. This guy is more of an obstacle than anything. There is one in every center of the battlefield, an obstacle that will go crazy in narrow spaces. It's not impossible to defeat, but there is no reason to defeat it either. I recommend you listeners try to avoid it. He clarified as the tall teenager bows. The man merely shrugged his shoulders and stared at the tall teen, who bowed and exclaimed, "Thank you very much, please excuse my interruption." All of them listened as I said, "Well, that's all from me. Finally, I'll give you listeners a present, our school motto." As the words flashed on the screen, he exclaimed, "The hero Napoleon Bonaparte once said, a true hero is someone who overcomes life's misfortunes. So, young listeners, go beyond. Plus ultra." He exclaimed, "Now everyone, good luck suffering," as he walked out of the room. Everyone eventually left the atrium and made their way to the locker rooms to change into their athletic attire. Izuku getting ready for the test while dressed in his light blue track suit. However, he didn't start taking out the training weights he had been wearing beneath his clothes until almost everyone had left. He was wearing a vest that weighed about 10 kilograms, along with 3 kilograms of arm and shin bands. Izuku had been carrying an additional 22 kilograms of weight on his body the entire time. He began wearing weighted clothing as part of his quirk to strengthen his body, which contributed to part of this during his training. He contemplated whether or not to keep wearing them for the exam. However, he made the decision to remove them for the exam because he wanted to excel and place in the top 3. His body began to feel lighter instantly, as if all the weight had just dropped off his shoulders. After packing them into his backpack and putting them in the extra lockers that were available, he headed for the bus. As he climbed aboard the bus headed for Battle Center B, his resolve to succeed was set. Moments later. Combat Center B, the UA Battle Centers. The academy served as unique training grounds for UA students. Would get comfortable with their quirks. However, examinees from all over Japan would take the entrance exam on the battlefields, with their performance being assessed. The actual battle centers were scale models of small cities with streets and buildings. It was an appropriate place for students to learn about being heroes in urban settings and to get their grades without causing any damage to any real-world city properties. Izuku felt the familiar fear swirling inside of him as he looked up in amazement at the doors to the training arena. But he slaps himself in the face and pulls himself together. This is sufficient to give him a shock and settle his fears. Calm down, you've prepared for this, you possess All Might's power and your own quirk. Looking around at the numerous examinees who had gathered to take the exam, he told himself that this should be easy. It was then that he noticed the girl from this morning. She was dressed in a black and white track suit with the sleeves rolled up and a white t-shirt peeking out from the open zipper. But still, there are a lot of people here. I wonder if I can actually do this, he said. He was going to approach her and say, "Oh, it's that nice girl from this morning. Should I go over and say thank you?" I never did get to ask her name and thanked her, when he heard a voice. A recognizable voice said, "I see what you're up to, you're planning on measuring that girl's level of concentration, aren't you?" As Izuku turned to face the tall teen from the presentation. He was dressed in blue skin-tight gym clothes with his legs chopped off at the knee to reveal 2 growths on his calf that looked like engines. Izuku was immediately afraid of the serious teen and questioned, "Who exactly are you, my friend? I hope you're not planning on distracting her and your fellow examinees, are you?" All the other examinees turned to stare at the boy and muttered to themselves as a result of his declaration, claiming that they shouldn't be concerned about him being a challenge because he didn't appear all that tough. They experienced luck. Izuku felt pain on the inside. It felt exactly like middle school. People making negative remarks about him, telling him that he should give up on his dream and that he would be worthless. Is this going to be middle school all over again? He wondered as the same feelings of inadequacy and self-loathing that had been weighing him down began to resurface in the back of his mind. Grasping his fist, he pondered whether he had undergone any transformation or remained the same, useless Deku, from before. A-A-A-A-N-D start. But before he could respond, there was a collective, huh? Present Mike was perched atop a tall tower with a commanding view of the 7 training centers. It took Izuku a mere moment to register his words before everyone started running through the large door. What's the matter? Were you expecting a countdown or something? There is no such thing as a countdown in a real battle. Get moving, he exclaimed. He he exclaimed, realizing that there was now a small space between him and the others, and expanding with each passing second. He exclaimed, "Crap, I started late," and assumed the sprinter's stance. Red veins began to appear around his legs as he bounded after the others, exclaiming, "No choice. Need to use 1% to catch up." He was lucky that he was able to take on One for All during the extra month. Otherwise, he would have fallen behind and faced a significant disadvantage in trying to earn some points. But now that they were fighting off a swarm of one-pointers that were bursting from the buildings, he was able to catch up to the others. Some of them reacted right away, using their quirks to completely destroy them. Izuku would have been geeking out at the variety of quirk users surrounding him in any other situation. But he was concentrating on racking up as many points as possible at the moment. As soon as he finished thinking that, a single pointer broke free from the wall next to him. "A one-pointer," he exclaimed, startled, as the robot, resembling a humanoid, turned to face him and pointed its single red eye at him. "Target locked." Response: "Murder," the device yelled, striking the boy with a metal fist. Izuku would have been afraid of the robot in front of him in a previous life. The machine's unexpected appearance would have made him tremble, and he probably wouldn't have been able to handle it. However, this was a different Izuku entirely. This was the Izuku who discovered his own quirk, finished a 10-month training program with 1 month left to spare, and trained under All Might to control the power of his quirk. He was prepared. Izuku instantly remembered his fight with All Might, so he dodged the blow, focused the power of One for All 1% into his fist, and buried the machine in his chest. A deep dent instantly caused the chest to collapse inward. The robot was then hurled backward as it collided with another robot, which had a scorpion-like appearance and was reading 2 points when it was destroyed by the oncoming robot. The moment the two robots fell to the ground, Izuku appeared momentarily stunned. Then, with the red veins gone and his hand still a little red from the blow, he glanced down at his fist. He was too preoccupied to notice another robot charging up behind him, ready to strike, and he turned around too late, exclaiming, "Holy crap. I just got 3 points." However, by happenstance, a laser penetrated the robot and created a sizable hole in it. Art of seduction. Izuku turned to see a blonde boy with extravagant clothes and an odd smile on his face standing and posing with an odd device around his stomach when he heard a voice call out. The boy with the blonde hair said, "Merci, we made a very good team," and shrugged. With a French accent, he remarked, "But, I don't think we'll meet again," and quickly left. "Adieu," he exclaimed, leaving Izuku unable to look away from the odd boy. He asked himself, was he speaking French? Izuku shook his head at the voice. 7 minutes and 2 seconds left. He turned to see more examinees destroying the other robots, but he was interrupted by the sound of more explosions. He watched as the previous nice person touched a couple of the robots that floated up into the air before crashing back down as she put her hands together and said, "Release." He saw the tall teen from before jumping towards another robot and smashing it with his legs, and he heard her say 12 points. All the while uttering 35 points. Izuku realized he only had 3 points and that everyone else had already passed him, which is when he began to panic. He could hear people arguing with each other and making their points about taking their kills all around him. He briefly experienced fear and depression as he began to believe he would fail. He quickly reminded himself that he was taking a test and that he couldn't afford to lose focus, so he was able to shake it off. His ears ringing with All Might's words, he saw the big man materialize in front of him. "When you're fighting, you must focus on the battle, don't let other things distract you and keep on fighting. But also don't forget to follow." Another one-pointer charged at Izuku and swung its fist at him, cutting off the memory. Izuku barely had time to respond, so he raised his left forearm to block the approaching fist. The sudden sharp jolt of pain shot through his arm. Metal met flesh. It was evident to him right away that these things were far more powerful than they appeared. Seriously. One punch is enough to trigger endurance. UA really is serious about this, he exclaimed, taking note of their incredible strength. However, he was also now. With his body stronger now, he was able to keep himself still while the pain shot through his body, starting at his left arm and ending at his right fist. And he destroyed the robot with a fist, just like he did with the refrigerators he practiced on. The robot collapsed to the ground as the back exploded out of it in an instant. His left arm was still trembling from the blow, and blood was slowly trickling down his bandaged fist and onto the floor from his fist's knuckles. Honestly though, it didn't hurt all that much, and he was still able to fight. "That's correct," he said, balling his left fist. "I can't stop fighting. I just need to keep moving and earn more points. I have to get into UA otherwise." Then, he noticed 3 more 1-pointers and a 3-pointer approaching from the left, diverting his attention. He quickly summoned 1% into his legs and raced toward the 4 robots across the street. He cut off the power to his legs and directed it into his right arm as he ducked and weaved past the machines. His reflexes were slow when switching between limbs, but he was able to handle power changes and unexpected situations by using endurance. He broke a 1-pointer with a blow to his right fist before being struck in the back by another. Endurance took the blow, transformed it into energy, charged his left fist, and then swung it around to sever its head, prior to destroying the final 1-pointer and channeling 1 for all 1% into his right arm once more. Then he shifted his focus to the big 3-pointer and ran toward the robot, channeling 1 for all into his fist as it launched a missile at him that destroyed a portion of the road. However, he dodged it, sprinting up to strike the machine in the head to disable it and score 6 points out of a possible 4. In addition, he now had 9 points total after earning the 3 points previously. "If not, everything that All Might accomplished for me would be in vain," he exclaimed, turning around as additional robots started to gather in the square. As he ran, 1 for all 1% poured into his legs, and there is no way. He cried out, "I'm going to let him down," as he ran and fought harder, his passion and love for his hero pushing him to be successful and get into UA High. Like All Might, just like his hero. UA Central Command Headquarters. A number of figures sat in complete darkness in a room, watching the battle take place. They watched as every examinee engaged in combat with the machines. Some stood out because they were shaped like squares, while others resembled mice, bears, or cats. Who knows? But anyway, the majority of them were watching the battles in front of them on the monitors. As they all stared at the monitors, a voice said, "A tight time limit and a huge battleground. Nothing quite like it to bring everyone's ardor and uncover their skills." Another voice, switching to some of the examinees, said, "Yes, but in this practical exam, the number of villains and their locations has not been shared with the examinees and they have a limited amount of time in a vast area. So, they must draw the rest of them out into the open." A large boy with 6 arms and extra sets of eyes appears on the monitor, using his limbs to locate the villains. Students who have information gathering abilities are quite helpful. The ability to gather information quickly and accurately is vital in any situation, the monitor says. The tall teen with the engines in his legs races across the battlefield at high speeds, smashing any machine that gets in his way. Though having speed and agility are also helpful, in which they can always arrive just in time and have a variety of uses in any circumstance, the teen says. The screen displays the previous boy, who is blonde, attacking the 1-pointers with efficiency and a stomach laser. Of course, being able to judge the situation calmly and effectively can prove to be an important asset, as they are smart enough to know when and where one needs to be, the screen says. The final picture, which reads, "And of course, there is always pure combat prowess," features Bakugo standing in the middle of a 3-pointer that has been completely destroyed, appearing to be relishing the destruction he can cause. The small figure said, "These are the basic abilities that are needed to keep the streets safe," and they all nodded in agreement. As they turned to face the skeletal-looking figure, a different voice said, "Still, there are 2 more aspects that cannot be ignored," glancing at the monitor. The boy with green hair was hit by a 2-pointer, but he got back up and slammed his glowing fist into its face, effectively destroying it. One of which is the ability to endure life's hardships, the pain that comes from being a hero. The ability to get back up after being knocked down and coming back harder than before. And the other is yet to be seen. Their caption read. "Nevertheless," they said, glancing at each monitor. She remarked, "We have quite the batch of promising students this year, don't we?" While a smirky figure with an outline of an overcoat and a skull-like shape appeared. "Well, we can't be sure of that just yet," he remarked as a red button in a glass panel raised. He pushes the button, saying, "Their real test is about to start." UA Combat Center. B. Izuku, whose hands were now bleeding and his breath was coming out of his heavy pants, slammed his fist into another 2-pointer. His face and hands were covered in small cuts and scratches, and his tracksuit was torn and cut in several places. He ignored all of that, though, as he searched for more villain bots. He searched around for any more villain bots and exclaimed, 15. I've only got 15 points. I need a few more if I want to pass. But as he looked around, he saw that they were getting harder to find because some of the examinees were fighting over who gets to take out which robot, frequently removing the same robot and calming it down afterward. He looked away, thinking, there's not many left, I don't think I'm going to make it, when all of a sudden the ground shook. What the hell? He exclaimed, and everyone in the battle center paused what they were doing to try to locate the source of the shaking. The sound of snapping wires soon caused large clouds of dust to rise from the ground, drawing everyone's attention to the center of the make-believe city. That's when a huge figure emerged from the building's corner, sending shivers down everyone's spines. Its size was enormous, its presence overpowering, and its form horrifying. With 8 red eyes beaming from its head, a massive robot that was easily taller than any of the surrounding buildings glared down at everyone, forcing them to look up in complete shock and horror. Everyone realized right away that this was the zero-point era, the obstruction that would go crazy in confined spaces and cause complete mayhem. As the enormous titan lifted its hand and slammed it down on the ground, sending a great deal of dust and wind skyward, Izuku exclaimed, but isn't that too much?" They all started to flee from the enormous machine in a panic. Izuku landed on his butt and staggered back, too scared to move as the enormous creature towered over them. With all might, he'd had enough training to know not to back down from a fight. However, this was a huge object. Given that the object was nearly the size of a building, how in the world was he supposed to be fearless? It was excessive. As they observed from the command center, one of the shadowy figures remarked, "An overwhelming threat. How people react after this shows their true nature, and whether they have what it takes to be a hero." Izuku was surrounded by running students and could only look up. Izuku glanced at the tall teen from before, but he hurried past him without offering to help. Izuku started to get up and start running after he was able to get over his shock. That's too much for me to handle. I need to get out of here. I need to get more points. I need. Ow. He was about to say something when he heard a little groan from behind him. He paused, turned slowly around, and just stared in disbelief. The sweet girl from this morning was behind him. Her foot was probably hurt, and she was stuck beneath a chunk of debris, unable to free herself. He stared at her, a shiver running down his spine due to the pained expression on her face. "I think it would be bad luck if you tripped, don't you?" He realized he couldn't just let her die as her voices continued to reverberate in his ears. He had to do something. He had to get her back, to keep the sweet girl alive. Then he stood up and ran to the machine, grabbing a stray pipe from a broken robot. He needed to distract the zero-pointer first because it was too close to attack directly and he still wasn't in complete control of One for All, unless he wanted to break all of his limbs. Shafting the sharp pipe like a spear, channeling One for All into his right arm at 1%, he hurled it towards the machine and nailed it in the eye. Similar to how he intervened to save Bakugo a decade ago. The spear struck the machine's central eye, causing it to halt, and the massive machine lets out a roar of pain. As the judges observed the spear piercing its eye, one of them exclaimed, "Oh, that's new?" The machine had stopped moving, and the girl looked up in shock to see the spear staring back at her. She turned to see a boy with big red shoes, curly green hair, and a blue track suit. "Hey, are you alright?" the boy said. He had a determined and brave look on his face instead of a scared one, which is how she knew right away that he was the nervous boy from this morning. He moved to her foot and removed the big chunk of rubble from her leg, and all she could do was nod numbly. Leaning her on his shoulder, he took her by the arm and said, "Come on, we have to go, now. That's not going to distract it for long." Then he started to move, frantically trying to pull himself and her clear of the machine. Present Mike called out, 2 minutes left, as Izuku nodded. With the girl leaning on his shoulder, he continued to carry her and said, "Okay, we just need to avoid it. Maybe it will stop when the timer runs out." The girl could only stare at him in silent wonder. He was afraid to use One for All, for fear of aggravating her injuries. The zero-pointer itself, with its 7 remaining robotic eyes zeroing in on one Izuku, had managed to ignore the pipe in its eye and was glaring down at the person who had thrown the spear. Another judge remarked, "Oh boy, it's mad," since this was the first time someone had attempted to divert the object. Then, ready to slam it down on the boy and girl with one swift motion, the machine reared back its fist. Izuku was able to turn around and see that, in addition to annoying the thing, he had also succeeded in deflecting its attention. Knowing he wouldn't be able to evade the attack in time, he turned to face the girl, the robot, and himself. Not with the girl still in his arms, hurt and probably unable to survive on her own. The only thing he could do was. Izuku pulled the girl by her tracksuit, lifted her up, and threw her away from him so that she was out of the robot's reach just as he swung his fist. The girl turned around and attempted to defend herself, only to be met with shock as the boy essentially gave his life to save her. Only for the first to crash into him, engulfing the field in a massive dust and debris storm. When the girl finally stopped and turned to look behind her in the hopes that he would make it out in time, she found a big metal fist embedded in the pavement where he had thrown her. She cried out, "No," fearing for the person who had just saved her life. The boy was crushed by the zero-pointer, and the other examinees, including the teachers observing from the monitor room, looked back in disbelief. One of the teachers exclaimed, "Shit, call recovery girl. We're going to have a seriously injured kid on our hands," as All Might could only watch in concern. "Midoriya?" he asked, unable to look past the numb screen because the robot's fist was still buried in the earth. Everyone in Battle Center B was silent for a moment, admiring the bravery of the young man who gave his life to save a complete stranger. The boy from earlier could only look on numbly as he recalled telling the other boy to stop getting in the way of others while he just fled the machine that was about to crush the girl. Clutching his fist, he told himself that if it hadn't been a test, he would have acted similarly. The girl, on the other hand, was staring at the boy who was obviously crushed beneath the fist with an intense look of guilt. Her only wish was that she could have replaced him, so he wouldn't have been crushed like that. However, the robot's fist started to move unexpectedly as it started to rise slowly. A red light started to shine underneath the fist, drawing attention from everyone including the teachers. There was a small hand pushing the arm back, and people's jaws dropped and eyes widened. Izuku began to slowly rise from under the fist, the arm itself glowing with a red outline. With his own hand, he slowly pushed back the giant's arm, his skin and hair glowing a red outline. Then he stood squarely beneath the giant's fist, leaving everyone speechless and in awe. He shot it straight up at the metal fist, his left fist clenching as the muscles in his left arm bulged slightly and the sleeve tore away. The entire right arm of the zero-pointer exploded off its body, sending bits and pieces flying into the air, shocking everyone even more. The robot appeared to roar in pain as everyone, including present Mike, stared in disbelief at the flying arm. Izuku's body was radiating red energy as he stood in the middle of the crater. His form was covered in a red outline, and his skin was glowing slightly yellow. His green hair, which swayed slightly in the breeze, had tiny red streaks in it now. But his eyes were white, as if he was simply gazing at the big machine in front of him. Then he dropped to the ground, a great shock of wind sweeping over the crowd, and as he did so, red veins shot across his body as he leapt up at great speed towards the Colossus. Izuku pulled back his right arm, the sleeve of his tracksuit tearing from the power, and before it knew it, he was in front of its face. He brought his fist back and swung it at the machine's face, his right arm glowing with the red light and veins. All Might, himself, was taken aback by what transpired next as he struck the zero-pointers in the face with his fist. Its entire body flew back from the force as the metal plating instantly gave way under the fist. The enormous machine was launched far away from the others and crashed into the wall behind the battle center, demolishing any buildings behind it, before bursting into a big fireball that caught everyone's attention. Even the people at the other battle centers turned to look at the noise. With their jaws dropped and eyes wide open, everyone could only stare at what they had just seen, which was both terrifying and incredibly amazing. The students quickly regretted their earlier belief that they were lucky that the child appeared weak. The tall adolescent who had made fun of him could only stare in wonder and even mild respect. The girl, meanwhile, could only look at the boy as he hovered in midair, taking a moment to appreciate how awesome he appeared. Although they were doing slightly better, the teachers' expressions were still shocked. All Might was the only one not totally taken aback. He simply stared at the glowing form of his successor and muttered to himself. Well, that was unexpected.
I will continue the story in next part. Till then, bye bye.